Death reset. Ethan woke up gasping for air, his body convulsing as if he'd been drowning. His vision swam as he clawed at the sterile floor beneath him. The metallic taste of blood lingered in his mouth, a bitter reminder of his last moments. It had happened again. The room around him was cold and blindingly bright. White walls, white floors, a single chair in the corner. The only sound was his ragged breathing. No one came to check on him. They didn't need to. They knew he would survive. He always did. Death was no longer an escape for Ethan. It was a sentence. A twisted, endless loop of agony. Every time they killed him, they brought him back. He would wake up, disoriented, still feeling the searing pain of whatever method they had chosen that time. And then, once his body had healed just enough to function, it would start again. The process was cruel, meticulous. Sometimes it was slow, a suffocating gas that burned his lungs until they collapsed. Other times, it was violent, bullets ripping through his chest or his spine, snapping under unbearable force. The methods varied, but the outcome never did. They called it death reset. It wasn't just about punishment. It was about control. Ethan could never fight back. He could never find peace. Every time he died, the cycle would reset, and he'd wake up to face it all over again. The horror wasn't in the dying. It was in the knowing that it would never end. There was no finality, no release. He had begged for it to stop. In the early days, he had screamed until his throat was raw, pleading for mercy, for someone to let him die for good. But that wasn't part of the deal. This was his sentence, a consequence of the lives he'd taken, the blood he'd spilled. They would never let him go. The door at the far end of the room slid open with a soft hiss. Ethan's body tensed as two guards walked in, expressionless behind their helmets. One of them held a syringe filled with a dark, viscous liquid. The sight of it sent a chill down Ethan's spine. "Not again," he whispered, his voice cracking. But they didn't care. They never did. The guard approached him, grabbing his arm with cold precision. Ethan thrashed, trying to pull away, but it was useless. The needle pierced his skin, and the liquid burned as it coursed through his veins. His heart raced, the pain building, spreading like wildfire through his chest. His vision blurred, and his lungs seized, unable to draw in air. He choked, his body convulsing as the poison did its work. Every second felt like an eternity, each heartbeat a desperate struggle. And then, darkness. And then, as always, light. Ethan woke up gasping, his body convulsing as if he'd been drowning. The cycle had reset, again. He lay there, broken, knowing he would never escape. Death was supposed to be the end, but for him, it had become a nightmare with no way out. The pain, the fear, it would all come again, and again, and again. In the corner of the room, the syringe gleamed under the harsh light, waiting for the next reset. Brandon's eyes snapped open in darkness, his wrists locked into cold restraints as his stomach churned with dread. He knew why he was here. The string of armed robberies he'd pulled off had escalated, each one more violent than the last. But it was the final heist, the one where he shot a man in cold blood, that brought him to. He didn't even remember the man's face when he pulled the trigger. The machine hummed softly and he felt a familiar, chilling sensation crawl up his spine. Not again? It started with the screams, their voices echoing in his head. He was trapped in a nightmare of his own making, reliving the pain he had inflicted on others. A sharp jolt shot through him, igniting every nerve as he felt the agony of his last victim. The sound of their bones cracking, the tears streaming down their face. It was raw, visceral, and it consumed him. Tyler writhed in his confinement, unable to escape the relentless cycle. He felt every bruise he had caused, every shred of hope he had stolen. The pain twisted through him like a living thing, and he couldn't separate himself from it. Each cycle was more intense than the last, tearing apart his sanity. He saw flashes of their faces, eyes wide with terror, lips trembling with cries for mercy. Each time he experienced their suffering, it was as if he were drowning, dragged deeper into a void of despair. He was forced to relive their moments of fear and hopelessness, their pain intertwining with his own, creating a hell that never ended. He realized. As the machine hummed, he found no solace, only the knowledge that he would endure this over and over again, feeling every ounce of their suffering until he was nothing but an empty shell. When the cycle finally ended, he gasped for air, only to hear the machine powering back up, ready to begin again. Tyler closed his eyes, knowing he would face it all once more. an endless loop of pain, a torment he had created for himself. There was no escape from this prison of his own making.